Good morning from New York. Online joining us is Garry Jacobs. I'm assuming he's joining us from Pondicherry, India, and Ketan Patel, who's based in London. As far as I know, you're joining us from Geneva, Switzerland. The President's report, my report, constitutes a vital element of each General Assembly convened by the Conference of Non-Governmental Organizations in consultative relationship with the United Nations. For this specific assembly, I have chosen to allocate a substantial portion of my report to a dialogue with three distinguished guests, esteemed friends, really, regarding the substantive context within which CoNGO operates at the United Nations, in the multilateral arena, and in the world. The President's report serves as a mechanism to inform CoNGO of pertinent issues and concerns requiring our attention. It will also serve as a crucial source of challenge and inspiration for the Assembly's statement, which will be promulgated by this Assembly. The latter part of my report will focus on CoNGO's organizational affairs. Our guests and I will be in conversation around the three-part theme of the Assembly: defining the present, shaping a shared future, asserting civil society participation at the United Nations. For the first topic, defining the present, my conversation partner is Mr. Garry Jacobs, who is joining us from India. Garry is no stranger to CoNGO. He keynoted the CoNGO Civil Society Summit on Substantive Issues in October of 2021. The organization he leads as CEO and president is the World Academy of Art and Science, and I'm sure he will say a little bit about that. It's the organization that was founded by Albert Einstein and Mr. Oppenheimer and a few other distinguished members of the United Nations and the international community. In 2021, the World Academy of Art and Science and CoNGO collaborated with the United Nations Trust Fund for Human Security to survey non-governmental organizations worldwide on their views of the UN concept of human security. The goal was to develop more effective policies and programs to promote peace and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Over the years, during my presidency, Garry and I have collaborated on numerous occasions, and he is my distinguished conversation partner for the theme, Defining the Present. In this segment, we will try to identify the existential and civilizational threats to people, to humanity and the planet. We will situate this in the context of geopolitical realities and the multilateral landscape. As you know, we convene today in a context distinguished by numerous global crises, including climate change, pandemics, forced migration, the emergence of authoritarian regimes, technological disruptions, and other urgent concerns, such as ongoing conflicts and wars. These existential threats pose substantial risks to both humanity and the planet. The importance of the UN and the multilateral system thus assumes heightened significance. I hope my conversations with Giselina here, Garry, and Ketan will demonstrate the importance of civil society and multilateral institutions working together to create a future focused on human rights, on justice, on peace, security, sustainability, and equity among many global public goods we must succeed in promoting. Addressing essential threats like climate collapse, nuclear proliferation, artificial intelligence, and pandemics demand a new, more compassionate and understanding approach to global governance. We need a governance system that is more open, transparent, and inclusive, guided by ethical responsibility, respect for human dignity, and democratic participation. While the multilateralism should consider local and global realities, it's essential to recognize the interconnectedness of communities, including those connected through information communication technologies and artificial intelligence. I also hope that this will support our discussion in the afternoon on late this morning, I should say, on my proposal to add a new section on the responsible and ethical use of ICT and AI in our current compendium of principles for NGO good practice. Defining the present requires the realities of a fragmented world marked by significant inequalities, ecological destruction, geopolitical conflicts, and setbacks in democratic processes, and recognizing the transformative power of multilateralism and civil society. The future depends on our ability to work together ethically and inclusively. And you've been a passionate advocate, Garry, for a holistic and ethical approach to tackling global challenges. You often emphasize that traditional governance models don't quite meet the needs of today's complex threats. And you encourage adopting a systems thinking approach that merges scientific understanding with moral responsibility. Having said all that, let me ask you a question. How would you describe the current state of uncertainty, insecurity, instability, and violence that the world is experiencing? Provide an overview of global evolution, if you will, since 1945, and how the acceleration of that global evolution has impacted us. The screen is yours, Garry.
Thank you, Levy, for inviting me for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you. We've reached a critical turning point in global social evolution. I'm sharing with you the views of the World Academy. We've been looking at this for the last 12 years, and especially very intensely in the last 1 year. In our view, we're in the midst of a stage that we refer to as global turbulence. It's part of a process and a sequence to evolutionary changes that began 80 years ago after World War II, and that reached a culmination with the end of the Cold War in, say, 1991. It's part of a process. It comes with a message. It's time for us to move on. It's time for a transition to a new stage in global social evolution. We can see what we're seeing today, what we've called global turbulence, is a reaction and a sequel to the extraordinary gains after the end of the Cold War. The reunification of Germany, the breakup of the USSR, the spread of democracy in Europe, peace, the end of the arms race, disarmament, the founding of the EU, the founding of the World Trade Organization and the explosive expansion in world trade, the birth of the internet, and the digital age. It is also a response, a direct response to the remarkable events that took place in 2015 with the adoption of Agenda 2030 by 193 countries and the Paris Climate Agreement as well. So we look at these things in the perspective of that history. When we refer to turbulence, what we have in mind are many of the things you referred to already, Levy, in your introduction. The rising level of threats related to violence, conflict, and war, which was certainly not what we anticipated, and most of the world anticipated a mere 5 or 7 years ago. The revival of the arms race and the reassertion of nuclear threats. The return of competitive nationalism and competitive security, very much reminiscent of the Cold War period. A weakening of the post-World War II alliances and forging of new ones. Declining power and effectiveness of international law and the multilateral institutions. Declining authority of national governments to handle a global world in which money, and business and activity has really gone out beyond the full control of nation states and governments. We've seen a retreat from democracy to plutocracy and autocracy, a loss of consensus and balance in politics, media, and public opinion, a polarization of society, media, and social attitudes, a rising tendency to extremism, even in the West, which we much more been before, and a declining trust in government, media, business, science, and the multinational organizations, the UN and its organizations as well. So this is what, in brief, I would capitalize as what we mean by the global turbulence.
Well, thank you, Garry. Let me give you a follow-up question. What are the underlying forces then that generate and sustain the current situation as you have described? Describe the contours, if you will, of a rapidly changing world and identify the root causes of global turbulence that you've mentioned and whether there is a resistance to it and by whom, and if there are obstacles that we need to overcome.
Well, I think there are a number of fundamental reasons or sources or conditions that have led us to this turbulence of various kind. The first one is for us to understand, is to recognize that we're at an unprecedented moment in history, in global history, in terms of the speed and complexity of global social transition. The world is in the midst of a very rapid transition, and this transition is manifesting as a period of unanticipated global turbulence. I stress the unanticipated. We didn't really see it coming. The speed of social transition is perhaps the greatest in history. Humanity, and there are very many expressions of that, humanity is becoming more closely interconnected and interdependent than ever before. Greater economic interdependence and reliance, greater physical interaction and interrelationship, intensification of all forms of communication between people at all levels, in all sectors of life, increasing intercultural contacts and impacts in the form of foreign students and tourism and media and so forth. An acceleration of technological innovation, which we very much associate with this period, and the economic integration of that technology and its impact, empowering new groups, new industries, new centers of power, globalization of markets and finance, concentration of wealth and money power, exercising unprecedented influence and control over politics, perhaps more than at any time in history. A transition from a world dominated by two superpowers to one with rising new centers of power and really questions about where is the power today and where will it be in coming years and how is it being redistributed and configured. We don't know the answers to that. It's the uncertainty levy that you referred to as we started. The rapid change in social values and the resistance to those values. We see parts of the world and parts of society in different parts of the world moving much faster towards more progressive values and others retreating and opposing it. I think that's the first point I would make is the speed of change. The second one is to the question you asked is the sources of resistance and obstacles to that change that have led to the uncertainty, the insecurity, the friction, the resistance, the reaction, the reversals, and even the retreats from many of the things that we took for granted in the last 30 years. They have the character of the symptoms of a period in which the speed of change exceeds the capacity of people, institutions, and society to adjust. We're simply, as a world, not able to adjust to the magnitude and speed of these changes. Many people and many parts of the world feel left behind, They're frightened by it. They're threatened by it. There's a sense, a psychological sense of fear and alienation and insecurity, both from those who look forward to a future but are not sure what to look to find it, and those who feel are frightened by it. There's a rising sense of insecurity, rising inequality, rising economic imbalances, the impact of technology on many things, one of the on employment. Those who are in studying today and preparing for a career are wondering what jobs will really be available in a year or two or 5 because of AI. And those who are in work today are wondering what jobs will be available for them 5 or 10 years or a few years down the line. There's the reaction and reversal of the post-Cold War security system. We thought we had entered a new phase, but we see there's a tendency also to go back to some of the thinking and values and behaviors and attitudes of the Cold War period. I mentioned a rise of new centers of power, as well as the defensiveness and insecurity of existing centers of power that find it hard to swallow the idea that the world may be organized differently in the future and power may be differently distributed in the future. We see the entrenchment of centers of power unwilling to concede their dominant position, whether it's government or centers of wealth or countries possessing fossil fuels or whatever it may be, refusing to accept the need for a change. We see refusal of powerful nations, states, to cede more authority to multinational organizations over national governments. We had a contract in 1945 to who would really be controlling the multilateral system. And now when it is proving to be simply not a viable system anymore in the way we're distributing authority and the way nation states are clinging to their authority, there's resistance to accept that we really need a multilateral system and a much stronger, empowered and financed multilateral system than ever before. There's also a resistance to challenges of traditional values, maybe related to gender or race or nationality or religion or other things. And last, I'll mention a shifting and increasing concentration of social power is concentrating in different areas. I mentioned the rising unprecedented levels of inequality. That also means centers of concentrated wealth and power having tremendous influence, not only within nation states, but across the world.
Worrisome, Garry.
Okay.
Worrisome that you've mentioned all this. If I may cut you off, but
it's fine. It's fine.
Perhaps respond to my last question. What then are the essential changes needed to guide us, to guide humanity through this turbulent transition toward a more prosperous and peaceful future? What's the future for the multilateral system given all these challenges?
Well, I think I don't want to miscommunicate my intentions here. I think this is a time of unprecedented opportunity. I think the transition is inevitable. And if we look through periods of history where there's been radical change, it's usually been through turbulence. It's almost always through turbulence. So I don't consider this an exceptional period, and I'm not trying to give a doomsday message. I'm trying to say we have to be prepared and prepare ourselves for more radical change and not incremental adjustments and certainly not going back in the other direction. In terms of those, there are many things that I think need to change. We're almost talking about a new paradigm, and it won't be just a few things like the movement towards democracy, starting with the American and French Revolution. It took place over a century and or more, 2 centuries, and had radical impact. But there are many things that need to change. One of them is the way we think and the concepts that we hold sacred. I'll just mention one or two to illustrate security. We're still living in a world where our definition of security is military preparedness to defend our borders. And we now have unprecedented military expenditure in the world. Maybe it's 2.7 trillion. That's a record. At a time when insecurity is rising, we need a shift from the idea that security means protecting our sovereign nation boundaries to security means protecting people, the security of people. We need a shift from national to security to human security. We need a shift in our thinking about power. Is power the something that we have to centralize in order to dominate for our security and exercise over other people? Or do we really need to find a way to empower nations everywhere and people everywhere? Because we won't be able to address the insecurity and the threats and the turbulence unless we can raise the sense of security of people. The fundamental roots of the insecurity are people are insecure. That's why they vote for radical and extremist governments, to look for solutions that they don't see, because they're frightened of the way things are going. And sovereignty, of course, the concept of sovereignty itself, from being an independent nation state that we guard our rights to do what we want as sacred, to a concept of our relationship with other nations for cooperation and collaboration, that we're all in this together, and we can only solve our problems when we are collectively cooperating. And we need a shift in our sense of identity from emphasizing the nation state, which has played a very critical role in evolution up until now, to really realizing, at least with one foot, we belong to humanity and we have to act for that.
I think if we could end it with that good note, with collaborating as one humanity, and then we'll come back to you toward the end again. Thank you, Garry. Thank you indeed for sharing your thoughts and with such warmth, but passionate and with clear purpose. Your insights truly inspire us. Let me now turn to the second topic under our assembly theme, securing a shared future. In this segment, I want to examine what must be done about the existential threats that Garry talked about: threats to people, threats to humanity, threats to the planet. And if we are to build and secure a shared future, what needs to be done? How must we address these existential and civilizational threats? What tools do we possess? And what values must we support and promote to enhance multilateral cooperation? As has been characterized, we're facing a complex landscape of overlapping crises of climate change, geopolitical fragmentation, authoritarianism, misinformation, and technological upheaval. The 2025 United Nations Global Risk Report warns that these polycrises are worsening, with armed conflict, extreme weather, and societal polarization as main threats. Multilateral cooperation, once crucial to global stability, now encounters challenges due to resource constraints and assaults on democratic institutions, including international law. Realizing a collective future necessitates courageous, inclusive, and ethical endeavors from all actors and stakeholders across all levels of society and governance, including you, me, civil society, NGOs around the world, including industry and technological leaders. Building on my conversations with Garry Jacobs about defining the present, I will now engage another distinguished guest and a good friend, Mr. Ketan Patel, on the theme Shaping a Shared Future. Let's welcome Ketan Patel, founder and chairman of Force for Good, which he established to support the United Nations Secretary General Sustainable Development Roadmap. Ketan joins us from Geneva today. Ketan sees emerging tech, AI, renewable energy, Internet of Things as key to unlocking a $15 trillion market and advancing about 90% of UN SDGs. His 9 big ideas suggest scalable solutions in energy, clean energy, digital health, and education, emphasizing universal broadband and generative AI that could meet a requirement of these goals. Nevertheless, Ketan comes to us with the caution that geopolitical competition for technological supremacy threatens international cooperation. And Ketan, you strongly endorse an inclusive, networked frameworks that prioritize collaboration over rivalry. May I now ask you a first question as we enter into this conversation? Ketan, based on your work, why is the world in such a difficult time with crisis and uncertainty arising so quickly as we have witnessed?
Thank you, Liberato. I'm delighted to join you. And I did listen in on the sessions before this, and I was delighted to hear my friend Garry lay out the turbulence that we live in. Based on the work we've done, our explanation would be that the world is in a transition between 2 very different civilizations. Almost like we were from the agricultural civilization to the industrial civilization. And today it's the industrial civilization to the information civilization that we are about to transition to. And when these transitions happen in history, you inevitably find that those that are powerful and wealthy in the first era, in this case the industrial one, will resist this change. They will wish to hang on to what they have. And so we are seeing the chaos of people hanging on to the power they have and the wealth they have. And at the same time, you're seeing a whole new breed of people arise who wish to move to the future. And they wish to unlock science and technology to do so. And this is a clash of cultures, of values, of organizations and institutions, of structures, and almost everything that we have was built for a different era. And so it is no surprise that actually all these things will be challenged, and they will either transform or they will die. And that's true for every type of institution we have today. And I think that is the core explanation. But I also want to reflect that at this time, though, particularly I think this year is an important year, 2025. And when this history is written looking backwards, we'll see how important a year it was. Because in this year, I think more overtly perhaps than ever before, we're seeing the notion that might is right is the way to assert yourself in the world. And so the power is being used for those that have power for themselves more than anything else. And so I think it's a very difficult time in this transition. And it's a precarious time, therefore, to not be united. And there is no counterforce. It felt we began this century thinking there would be unlimited progress, technologically, scientifically, socially, highly inclusive. And organizations like yours have been fostering that thought and doing the good work that needs to be done. And I think we've hit a point where there is a counterforce, which is perhaps the most powerful force. And it says, might is right. And it says to the people, it's right to be scared because there is an invasion of people who are different from you. And this fear is promulgated not just by people who speak, but also all the way through the social media networks and the technology networks. And we are systematically being divided. And there isn't a unifying force, and there is no counterforce that is strong enough against might is right. And this is the very difficult time that I think that we're in, that sets the backdrop to the progress that we need to make.
Ketan, what would stop that onslaught? What would stop that onslaught of these challenges that you mentioned?
Yes. So, Liberato, what we did as Force for Good was to say, what are the assets of the world and what are the needs? And we took as a touchstone 2 documents. One is the documents that capture in 2015 one of the most important agreements of humanity, which is the UN Sustainable Development Goals, a commitment from all the countries in the world to work together to raise everybody on every dimension that we could think of. It's a fantastic endeavor, a beautiful ambition that we all thought was the right one. And the second document we took was the IPCC report, which looks at climate change and says what will happen as a result of climate change. Now, this is a dramatic report, and essentially what it says is we're in a difficult time where almost everything that we have can be shaken just through climate change. And it points to how the sources of production, where things are made, where food is grown, which cities can be protected, the economics of doing so, where diseases are currently, where people currently live, all of that would change because of climate. It does point out that the North will suffer less than the South. The South will be devastated because the heat is already there. And this temperature change would make a huge difference in devastating the South. But the South, therefore, will be displaced. And as we see, the North is highly vulnerable. If a few 100,000 people move into a country in the North, you get a regime change. So what could actually address this? And so what we did is we took those two reports and we said, what assets would you have to build if you were to address this challenge? And what you find is the answer is astonishingly interesting because there are so many assets that the world actually needs to build, which if it did would lead to solving this problem. So if I take some of the headlines of it, you find that a few 100,000 schools need to be built, a few 100,000 hospitals need to be built. Defenses need to be built in the sea for cities that sit on coasts. Miles and miles of roads still need to be built. And these are all things that we know how to do. Affordable homes need to be built. I think it's something like nearly 300 million affordable homes need to be built. Solar farms need to be built, or the equivalents that are sufficiently clean. So there is an investment boom potential. And we try to quantify what that was. And what we found, Liberato, it's about $125 trillion worth of investment that can be made to build these things. About half of it can be built to the profit the market expects today, which is very high. Another half would require solutions to be passed from one part of the world to another at a cheaper rate than you might expect the market to fund. But something like more than 90%, the technology is available, the solutions are available, the investment's required. So it is completely possible to turn the chaos that we have today and the global disruption that Garry spoke about into something that is highly positive, where the world is generating an investment boom, turning needs into markets. And that's the key thing. It's not that we have a shortage of money. There is ample money. Our analysis suggests there's $700 trillion of money. So the money
I
is.
was going to say, if I may,
Sure.
You're also a champion for capital for good.
Yes.
And I hope that you will include that. So not only just force for good, but capital can be a force for good. And you work with Goldman Sachs. You manage one of the biggest funds in the world.
Not that
As we
big.
transition to your last question,
Yes.
what lies beyond the crisis? The crisis
Sure.
that Garry spoke about, the crisis that you've spoken about. Is there a reason to be hopeful? Is there a reason to be positive for humanity and the planet?
So, Liberato, I think there is. Look, there's $700 trillion of capital in the world of wealth. About 500 trillion of that is liquid, which means it can be moved from one place to another. About $270 trillion is in the debt and equity capital markets. That money chases returns. So what lies beyond this crisis is that there is a wholesale change in the risk of markets across the world, particularly in the global south, such that they become hugely attractive and investable. That is a matter of policy, of governance, of things that the UN, the World Bank, and others have done before. Examples have been set in places like the formation of the EU, where countries that had anomalies in terms of their wealth, disparities rather, came together and established a market. These things can be done, so we have the means. Also, we are on the brink of the biggest scientific breakthroughs the world has ever seen. AI is just the first. There are so many that we highlight in our work that we publish certainly for broad consumption, that I think we're on the brink of a new renaissance of technology and prosperity. But we're in that transition where we haven't let go of the past. And therefore there is this horrible turbulence today. But beyond it, we're already making the progression towards the science, the technology, the abundance that can make a huge difference. And at some point, the markets will see that. But to help that happen, it does need a catalytic change in the policies that make need not something where you have to stick your hand out, but something that is a market that is investable.
Thank you very much, Ketan. The Assembly sincerely values your thoughtful insights and suggestions for creating and shaping a shared future. Ketan, Garry, Lina, I hope you have a few more minutes to field questions from New York, attendees in person and attendees online. Our communications team will monitor the screen for a couple of questions, maybe from online participants. And a question from Richard Jordan, a question that he would like to field to Garry. Garry, what is your view on the way in which the UN 80 initiative and work streams are playing out?
Well, I think the idea of the three pillars, the three streams, peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights, is the very right formula. In all our work, we've seen it's really the interdependence between these three, which is the source, or the lack of connection between them is the source of our problems, and any solution has to be integrated. I mentioned earlier about we've spent a lot of time looking at peace and turbulence and violence and the connection it has with insecurity, human insecurity. And we've drawn a formula. There can be no real peace while people are feeling insecure, and there can be no real security without a foundation of peace. And of course, the sustainable developments and human rights are the glue that makes that possible. The kind of things that Ketan was talking about for implementation of the SDGs, we've already got the right formula. The problem is, how do we make it? How do we break and overcome the resistances? I think we're talking a lot about, and naturally in CoNGO we would be talking about the role of the NGOs in dealing with the multilateral institutions. But I think there's another dimension to this, which really is an untapped opportunity today, and that is the mobilization and connection of civil society around the world, especially the under 30 civil society. And for the first time in history, we have the technology to connect the world without necessarily going through the center. And all the changes we need and we have talked about require the preparation and support of civil society, not just the organizations, but the population, the general population. And civil society is the closest link we have, the closest communication we have to people. And we're seriously talking about how do we magnify the voice? As Jesselina said, how do we give voice to the public and to civil, but how do we magnify it even in the interconnection between them? And I think it's got to be part of our solution for the future, that outside of what's happening at the nation state level and at the multilateral level, what are we doing to organize? We have the technology now to organize global society informally, outside the existing institutional structures, into a really powerful force, into a global social movement for transformation. I think that's where we have to look for the power.
Thank you, Garry. There's a question here in New York.
Hi, I'm Rachel Elliott Baird of Servas International, and my question was for Mr. Patel. So we have a solution of generating movements and civil society really being the center of the shift. And Mr. Patel spoke about this time of insecurity and this pushback of the current organizations of nations that are holding on and don't want to move forward. So he also spoke of that we have the money. All of these funds are getting cut, but that actually globally we have the money to change and change rapidly. So I would like to know how we can be actionable as NGOs to help that move forward. Thank you.
That's a question.
Hi, thank you very much for that. I'm going to take two threads, one Jesselina put in and one Garry put forward too, which is if you took all the NGOs and you could somehow organize them into the themes that they choose to make an impact on, you'd probably find the most powerful institutions in the world are then in the room on every single topic. And it wouldn't matter whether it was education or poverty alleviation or mass financial inclusion or disaster. Every single crisis we have, if you took all the people of goodwill who are already working, who can measure their impact, who are all the NGOs of the world, you probably find this is the biggest version of UNDP that exists on the planet, is already out there and is productive. To make that meet the money, so the money flows, requires us to take a country or a locality within a country and to show that it can meet the requirements of governance, where capital can flow in and flow out and make its money. And to do that, it does require changes to regulation and law, but it also requires changes to how things operate on the ground, which all of you know how to do. I had this conversation recently at UNDESA, and they were saying, could we bring together a specific project in a specific country with a series of NGOs, who can be participants too, of course, with the people that have the money and the solutions, and see if we could implement it. And we'd very much like to do that. And Liberato, I don't know how we galvanize to do that with you, but it's something we're now starting to think through as to how it can be done, given there is an appetite to see solutions meet need in a way that is market friendly so the money can flow.
Thank you. Very inspiring, all three of you. But Ketan, I wanted to follow up on this conversation of funding. We're at a crossroads, CoNGO. Our membership dues are minimal to the extraordinary work and the potential that we have as an organization. And I wanted to ask you, what recommendations do you have for us as an organization, as a collective, as a platform for the over 500 NGOs that we work with around the world to be able to come together and fund our initiatives? Because I think that that's critically important. As the Catholic Church will say, no money, no mission. And I think that that's the same thing for us. And I think we're going to have to really double down on strategies to look at how we can better serve the world, but we'll need to be better funded. Thank you.
Sure. I think that's a great question. And I would be happy to work with you to look at that in detail, to understand better what you do, the impact it makes, and to see how that can be presented to people who have finance. I'm also a member of the executive team of the World Academy of Art and Science. And I think collaborating between the three of us, we could probably work out what there is to do. What I would warn you is this is a brutally difficult time for money flow, as you know, because the money is chasing returns in liquid capital markets, not in solving problems. But there is an answer. If we get together and we work this through, I'm sure we'll find it. I'd be happy to, for our organization, to invest the time to do that with you, to figure out what the answer might be. Garry, I think you agree, right?
Absolutely.
Looking forward to that, Ketan. 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, during the high-level segment of the high-level debate at the General Assembly, a side event was organized by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and Ford Foundation. And the Better World Campaign, which is the fund manager for the UN Foundation, the Turner Money, and the Open Society, and Mandip Tiwana, the executive director of Civicus. They were all in a panel, and they spoke about the fact that philanthropic money, official development aid, and support by governments to institutions and organizations, just like what Jesselina warned us about, are running out of funds. And this dwindling of official government support is not going to be replaced by available philanthropic money. And Better World Campaign speaker said, as we speak, more than 100 NGOs are closing down every day in many parts of the world because of more funding. I bet you there are many CoNGO members in that situation. They may not be able to pay their $330 annual membership due. So indeed, Peter, you're made for the next term, and I thanking in advance Ketan and Garry and Jesselina, if we can all pull our thoughts together on how to work out a way, even without funds, that we can still leverage that which Jesselina talked about and Ketan talked about, the synergy when we come together. Is there, yes, one more question here on the.
I have an immensely simple question. Humphrey Tonkin, Universal Esperanto Association. We are very poor at listening. We're extremely good at talking. That's what we're doing here right now. But is anybody actually listening out there? The majority of the world's population doesn't speak English. Why should they listen to any of us as we talk in our sophisticated way using English or other languages with a sense of our own elitist importance? I put that out there not because I have an answer, but because it's a question that we have to address. It's the grassroots that have to be involved in any future improvement in the world's situation. And I don't think we're sufficiently bothered about that. It's great that we have an education, that we can talk, that we can discuss how the world should be shaped. But the world, meanwhile, is going about its business and not paying much attention.
Thank you, Humphrey. Indeed, you have an answer. And I must say that Humphrey and many other organizations, through their efforts, they have launched the NGO Committee on Language and Languages. And recently, the committee held a briefing together with the President of the General Assembly on multilingualism at the United Nations. That is not a simple response to a simple question, which is also intriguing. My mother language is Ilocano. My national language is Filipino. Philippines is one of the top 5 English-speaking countries in the world. But tell you what, to even friends, they call my English Philippinisms. It does not have the Queen's pronunciation. Sometimes it uses S for civilization, and elsewhere it uses the Z. We are a confused group of people, and I appreciate. Ketan, would you respond to that?
In terms of language?
About language,
Chris'
yes.
point?
You are in the Queen's speaking country, the United Kingdom.
I'm in the UK, right? So I think Humphrey's point is absolutely bang on right. We're an English-dominated world where too much of the world feel left out. And this is our history. This is not the way forward, but this is our history. And no matter what research you read, it's in the English language. Everything is biased towards the English language and to the dominant culture that came out of Europe. And this is set to shift, and is shifting with the rise of China and the rise of India and the rise of Asia overall. And it will shift even more as we get prosperity across the global south. So I think that this reflects our history today. If we really wish to communicate out there, there has to be a cascade effect of what we do and an outreach to do that. One of the big ideas that the World Academy has is the idea of a platform, multilingual, for global voices, where people can speak in their language and their voice and communicate to everybody. And that's a platform that is expensive to put up, but it's an important idea.
Question from Tobias Rusen of the International Federation of Social Workers. The question is how to find contractors on the ground to realize each of the SDGs to locally unfold the goals. What should CoNGO members do? He said probably Ketan can address. You mentioned about your work on the SDGs earlier. And then another question possibly for Ketan, but for all. With the increasing push for private sector engagements at the UN, what are your thoughts on private sector accountability to ensure, I usually falter on these acronyms, ESG commitments, and translate into measurable impact rather than becoming cases of SDG washing, especially in the face of dwindling resources and shrinking development regarding finance. This is from Anita Thomas of the Women First International and the current chair of the NGO Committee on Financing for Development. That's a good segue, Garry. Garry, you are also the president and the CEO of the World University Consortium. And I know I'm aware of the work of the members of the consortium in realizing the SDGs. We've been together in events that you've organized along those lines. So take a stab at any or all of the questions raised.
Well, thank you, because it's the topic that I think we haven't yet really covered, which is one of the most powerful, potentially powerful, and that is education. With the technology that Ketan very briefly mentioned, roughly about half of the world population that would like to seek higher education has no access to it today, can't afford it, doesn't have it available to them. We're now, because of the technology, we're working on in the academy on a program for India, but we hope it could be globally, a technology that could provide higher education in any language at about 1/4 the cost of the delivery system of the traditional brick and mortar education, and multiply the power and the coverage of the existing system at the same time. And I think civil society has a tremendous role to play in this, because we need to reach out to your constituency or the people. And when the people don't have access to the information and they don't understand what's going on and they don't understand their rights, naturally, they're not going to exercise a very powerful impact on the society, even when they vote. It won't be a very informed vote. So I think one of the critical areas, I understand why we're looking up at the multilateral system and the governments, but anything we could do to accelerate the dissemination of education. Now is the time. We didn't have this capacity before, but we do have it now. Now is the time to really multiply the awareness and access to that part of the population, roughly half the world's population, that doesn't really have access to the knowledge they need to even choose the best thing and the best opportunities for them.
Thank you, Garry. Ketan?
Here's what we found. The world has truly changed at this point in time, where it is very difficult to hold the private sector accountable for almost anything. And it is shifting in that direction. If you analyze where the money is, 2/3 of the money sits in the private sector. That money is busy doing what it was designed to do. It is in savings accounts and pension funds and life savings, and is invested to make sure it can meet those commitments. What we're talking about is drawing that money away from that to do something else that it was not designed to do. It would only do that if it was profitable to do so and the risk was low enough, given the mandates that it has. Regulatory change can encourage that, and the EU has been one of the leaders in that regulatory change. But in fierce competition with American forms of capitalism, the EU is uncompetitive and starting to realize that it will need to dilute, not strengthen its programs. And so we're in a very, very tough time. It's a longer conversation and much deeper. But if we are to take that money and have it deployed where it's needed, as opposed to where it's profitable, it won't happen. It can only happen if it's profitable to meet that need. And the accountability is unfortunately going down. So I think there's a requirement for NGOs who wish to be engaged in this to be one of the forums for actually finding the need, defining the outcomes, measuring the impact, and showing that actually there is real value in addressing these issues. And the more we can do that in the NGO environment, the more likely it is that we can attract that capital. I say it is a much longer conversation. I'm sorry to give you a high-level answer.
Ketan, Garry.
Right, can I say one more thing?
Oh,
Which is
surely.
the people that do the work, that are asking these questions, that are part of your group, Liberato, from our first interaction, I was stuck on you, Liberato, so forgive me. But as you explained it to me, and this is my personal experience too, these are the people who go out and engage and do the really good, decent work. It just so happens the money is not supplied for this work. And this is our real challenge, as has come up in this conversation, to see how the money can flow to that. And it's a tough problem to crack. But given our backgrounds, we should have the ability to think that through and test it and see if we can make it happen.
The three-themed topic of our assembly, defining the present, shaping a shared future, asserting civil society participation at the UN, has been a difficult discussion. But thanks to our distinguished guests and panelists, Ketan in Geneva, Garry in India, the load has been lightened because of your powerful insights and contribution to the elaboration of our theme. I would like to express my personal gratitude for honoring my presidential report. I didn't have to write that part of the report, did I? You provided the text, and I am immensely grateful to your contribution. And I'm sure our participants, our delegates to the 28th Assembly, express their deep appreciation as well.